So starting off today is going to be Jim Kegelmeyer, who's our virtualization director here at IGI. And then Alan Stalker is our VMware solutions engineer, and he's going to be carrying the bulk of the presentation. So I will hand it over to Jim right now.
Well, thanks, Megan. Great. So just so I know, who's responsible for making the slides go forward? Is that you or me?
That's Alan.
Alan, okay.
Yes,
yeah, I'm running the show.
All right. All right, terrific. So my name's Jim Kegelmeyer, and I lead our practice, our VMware practice at IGI, or our virtualization practice. And IGI, we're a VMware partner. We focus pretty much exclusively on solutions that involve VMware, the VMware software stack, and also technologies that support VMware virtualization technologies such as Dell EMC. And so we've been a leading partner with VMware for many years, and we pretty much focus on these different solution sets that are enabling for example, for K through 12. You know, people like Alan here who is our technical lead for the practice. They focus on solutions and enabling technologies. So you know, we help companies achieve their strategic goals, whether it's a corporation or a school district. Go ahead, Alan. Next slide, I guess. There we go. So yeah, so at IGI, what we do is we have a full service, full cycle process for assessing and architecting a customer's needs. We recommend what we think is the best solution based on what we assess as the customer's needs, and then we can deploy that. And so I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of other companies out there today who are really good at transacting business, selling products and technologies. We actually make it all work, and we can help you manage that solution going forward. So, Alan, where do I stop and you begin? Is this?
I think right here is probably a good point to stop for you.
Okay.
No offense.
Okay. Turn it over to Alan.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining the call today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us here and talk a little bit about Project Lead the Way and STEM and how we can help deliver some of these high-end STEM applications to your end users and students from the virtual data center. So I'm sure a lot of you know what Project Lead the Way is. What STEM is. It's a huge driver nowadays in educating students, faculty, and staff. So we're going to cover a little bit quickly about Project Lead the Way and some of the STEM modules that are out there, and then we're going to dive right into the technical stuff. So some of the STEM modules that we've had a lot of success with in the high school, middle school, and elementary school levels are a good majority of the Project Lead the Way modules. And if you're not part of Project Lead the Way, that's fine. This is still applicable to all of your STEM initiatives in engineering, biomedical science, computer science, and even your middle school and elementary school, some of those high-end applications that you need to deliver. So we've seen a lot of district demand for VMware solutions when it comes to STEM Project Lead the Way applications and curriculum. I'm not going to read these to you verbatim, and I believe Megan can chime in here. I think we're going to probably send this deck out afterwards, or some of it anyway, a sanitized version of it. So if you want to read some of these school districts that are demanding, these sorts of solutions to help them be successful, these will be sent out in that email. So we did a little bit of a case study on a school district that we just wrapped up a project with in Rochester, New York. It's a relatively large public school, 6,000 students, and a lot of them have one-to-one devices that are provided by the district, iPads, Chromebooks, those sorts of devices. They're relatively inexpensive for the district, and the students can carry them around with them every day, bring them home at night. Their main problem was we have these high-end applications that are in a lab that students only have access to for maybe 2 hours a week, 40 minutes at a time, third period during the day. And we want to let them use these applications outside of the classroom so teachers can assign homework assignments and students can sit together and work on projects, things like AutoCAD, Photoshop. Typically, these one-to-one devices such as iPads and Chromebooks, they can't run the full AutoCAD suite or the full Adobe suite. They just don't have the horsepower. So this school district in Rochester had invested in really high-end desktop computers for a few of their labs. We're talking $5,000 machines a piece. And again, their main gripe with that was they sit dormant for a good majority of the time because there's only so many hours in the day that students are accessing them, and then they just sit there. So how can we deliver these high-end applications to these lower-end devices such as iPads and Chromebooks? How can we allow these students to access these applications outside of the lab, not only while in school, like the library or study hall, but from home? And how do we simplify the management of these applications for our IT staff? Instead of patching all of these lab computers with all of these applications, how can we simplify that process? So the solution that we helped them with was deploying VMware Horizon, virtual desktops, as well as applications on top of in this case, it was Dell hardware running vSAN, which is VMware's hyperconverged infrastructure. And we were able to solve all three of these problems, as well as some other problems that they didn't even know that they had. And they are a great success story for us. And not only does the IT staff love the fact that it's so easy to manage and deploy these desktops and applications, but the students, their utilization of it has been wonderful. They were, kind of scared that teachers and students wouldn't embrace this, but they really have, and that's huge to get that buy-in from your students, staff, and faculty. So with that, let's talk about the solution itself. So as I kind of mentioned, these are some of the common challenges that we see with school districts when it comes to delivering STEM applications, these high-end applications. So the cost, as I mentioned, the rising cost of workstations that you need to refresh more often because these applications do demand so much processing power, graphics intensive, and the one-to-one device, as I mentioned, is the students may have them, a Chromebook, an iPad, but they're unable to use them for any of these applications. It's totally out of the question. You're locked into a physical lab, so you have, say, 2-3 labs in your district that have these high-end machines. They can only access the applications when they're in class, and that's about it. There's no outside collaboration, and teachers can't assign any sort of homework assignments related to this because they can't provide access to these applications outside of the classroom. And then, obviously, physical machines are difficult to maintain when it comes to hardware break fixes, operating costs as far as staff going to sit next to someone trying to log onto a machine that's having issues, updating software. As I mentioned, that life cycle management of that software is tough. And then the dreaded Microsoft Patch Tuesday. I come from an IT background, and I absolutely loved Patch Tuesday, and that is definitely sarcasm. So that leads into VMware WorkspaceOne, which is tied to Horizon View for application and desktop delivery. So the message that you're going to take away here is access to any application or virtual desktop on any device, anywhere. and it's going to allow you, the administrator, to provide conditional access to those applications and desktops based on a student's whatever it may be, whether you break it out into Active Directory groups, things like that. You're going to be able to provision applications on the fly just by adding a user account to a group, or it's just a much simpler way to do it. Excuse me, I've been sick. So again, any application, any device, anywhere is really driven by the Horizon product and the VMware, what they call digital workspace or WorkspaceOne. So you're going to be able to provision these applications on the fly and manage them from a single pane of glass. And when I say manage, that even means updating. So, you need to push an update out for Google Chrome or Internet Explorer or Office 365 or AutoCAD. Instead of updating each machine individually, you update it once. And when a student or teacher logs on, they get the latest and greatest, and you only had to do it once. So it saves an absolute ton of time. WorkspaceOne is the portal that is provided through Horizon and WorkspaceOne for access on physical desktops or laptops, your iPhone, iPad, Chromebook, any device with a web browser can access WorkspaceOne. And this is where you're going to be able to provision those applications for students and faculty based on classes that they're in or things of that nature. And again, I talked about the conditional access. So you're going to have a lot of reporting tools, utilization metrics, things of that nature to really see what people are using in real time, as well as over the course of time. So you can bring this back to your upper management and say, this is where we're seeing successes, this is where we're not seeing successes. How do we fix that? So it's a great tool, great single pane of glass that makes your life easier, as well as the students, teachers, and faculty. So let's dive into Horizon itself a little bit and talk about how we can deliver these applications and kind of what's required as far as some of these technical things go. And I think Megan said everyone's on mute, but I think you're on mute by yourself. So if anyone has questions during the course of this, I would much rather have a conversation than lecture the whole time. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions. And you can raise your hand or something, or in the chat window, feel free.
Yeah, I think it's *6 to unmute.
There you go. Thanks, Jim. Or just raise your hand and I think I can unmute you from here.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Next slide. There we go. So some of the innovations with Horizon are, well, there's a lot of innovations. So this is a nice, quick and dirty slide of what I kind of already mentioned. So delivering applications with a few clicks of a button makes your life easier and the end user much happier. They don't have to wait for you to deploy an application to a whole lab environment. You click a button, the entire teacher's class has access to that application, and you're done. The life cycle of management of those applications. So again, as I mentioned, instead of patches come out, you have to schedule maintenance. You have to push out those patches, whether you're using SCCM or another patch tool. You have to reboot the machine. You have to do all of these things to update one application. If you could do it just with a couple clicks of a button, and you have the application updated and that's done, and everyone gets the latest and greatest, it's going to make your life so much easier. The Blast Extreme protocol is VMware's newest, latest and greatest protocol that is slowly taking over to replace PC over IP, which is it's still supported, and it's going to be supported for a long time, but Blast Extreme is the H.264 encoded version of the protocol that delivers these applications and desktops to your end users' devices. And it's absolutely incredible, some of the experiences that I've had personally lately a good example, I was on an airplane on my way to Mexico 2 weeks ago, and I was actually at like 33,000 feet, logged into a customer site from my iPad with Horizon, and I was running AutoCAD on my iPad from the airplane's Wi-Fi at 33,000 feet, and it was almost like I was sitting in front of a high-end computer. You know, I had almost no screen lag, and that's pretty crazy for airplane Wi-Fi. So that's part of that Blast Extreme experience, and what you're going to be able to do to deliver these applications to end users. And then again, the smart policies, that's more of a back-end management for you as far as delivering applications and desktops, who has access to what, and it's very granular and easy to manage. So we already talked about application delivery. We already talked about management from the data center, because again, all of your desktops and applications are going to be stored in the data center now. They're not on anyone's machine. They're not on anyone's iPad. They're not on anyone's laptop. That's all managed by you in your own data center. So you can pull that back anytime you want. But two things I like to hit on here are the low-cost storage and cloud delivery. The next slide you're going to see here, we're going to talk about the difference between persistent and non-persistent desktops. So that's where I really like to hit on the low-cost storage, but we can mention it briefly here. So persistent desktops, when you think of persistent desktops, we think of a full desktop that each person has access to. Think of a tower in front of everybody. Whereas a non-persistent desktop is a user gets a different desktop every time they log on. So it's a smaller, more condensed version of a full desktop, but it's going to save on storage costs because you're not having a full, thick virtual desktop for everyone. And then cloud delivery, there's a lot of, recently, there's quite a few different options as far as delivering Horizon from the cloud, whether it be Azure or AWS, or a hybrid of the two, on-prem and in the cloud. So it can create a great disaster recovery solution for you to say, hey, if our data center goes down, all of our end users can still access XYZ via Azure or AWS. So we'll talk about that architecture here in a little bit as well. So again, persistent versus non-persistent desktops. So the persistent desktop, as I mentioned, is a little bit more expensive, more storage required, and there's no operational efficiencies when it comes to managing things from the back end, right? The persistent desktop typically is better for the end user. Why? Because they get that great, I have a physical, almost desktop. It seems like everything's the same. I can change my desktop background to my cat, and it's there every time I log on. I can customize everything I want. My documents are where I left them, that sort of thing. So we see a lot of people say, hey, I don't want to use the non-persistent desktops because my end users are going to complain that they can't use that picture of their cat, and it's not there every time they log on. But VMware's made a lot of changes, a lot of strides in the last, 2, 3, 4 years, even since I've been a Horizon customer in the last 6 years. They've made a lot of strides in the non-persistent desktop area. They've made it to a point where there's no difference that I can see from an end user perspective between a non-persistent desktop and a persistent desktop. With tools such as User Environment Manager and App Volumes, we can now layer in those applications. We can layer in desktop backgrounds, user customizations, favorites, documents, most used applications. So every time that user logs on, it may be a different desktop because it's a non-persistent desktop, but we inject all of those things back on top of that non-persistent desktop. These applications, these user personalizations that are, for whatever reason, so important to the end users. It makes them feel more comfortable using virtual desktops now because everything looks familiar. There's no change. So that's the strides that VMware has made in this area, and there's a huge savings for you, the IT department, because it saves you time managing these desktops, and the storage overhead is much lower because you're not having a 50 or 60 gig persistent desktop for each individual. So storage costs much easier to manage and deploy. You can deploy hundreds of desktops within minutes now, and it's absolutely incredible what the possibilities are. So I mentioned application delivery, app volumes. So with app volumes, we can actually layer in applications on top of desktops. So not only can we provide application delivery as far as just delivering that application through Horizon. So through the Horizon client, through the application on an iPad or Chromebook, through the HTML5 client, a user can log in and click on Microsoft Word, and it will load and look like Microsoft Word is running natively on their tablet, Chromebook, whatever it may be. But we can also layer in applications to these virtual desktops. So say an end user or a student is in Engineering 101 in high school. You can add what's called an app stack for all of the applications that are required for Engineering 101 to their virtual desktop via groups, WorkspaceOne. There's a slew of different ways to do it, but you can bundle all of those applications for Engineering 101 into an app stack. And then when the user logs on to their virtual desktop in the spring or the fall, whenever they're taking that class, all of those applications for Engineering 101 are automatically there, and there's no intervention from the end user. There's nothing else that needs to be done. And then we can take that a step further and say AutoCAD needs to be updated, or Acrobat, because it's part of that app stack, needs to be updated. You update it once within that app stack, everyone else in Engineering 101 has the updated version. So you do it once, you're not pushing out all these patches to end users, and it just makes your life so much easier and seamless to the end user. Again, that personalization data is also injected, layered in on top of that virtual desktop as well. So it really makes a truly stateless desktop experience for your end users, while making everything so much easier for you to manage on the back end. So with Horizon, we've been able to manage and make your life managing all of these applications and user data much easier. And we've merged that into, like I just said, a truly stateless desktop. You've been able to deliver these applications in seconds. Everything is in your data center, in your control, not out there roaming around on laptops for you to update and manage. And it saves you time and money when it comes to the non-persistent virtual desktops. And it's amazing for the end users, because not only do they have access to these desktops and applications while in school, in the classroom, in the library, in study hall, they can take it home with them and work on homework with friends and collaborate. So it makes a lot of sense, and we've seen a lot of students be really successful and embrace this because they're able to use these applications at home, and it's really preparing them for that college-like experience. So we kind of touched on this already. I'm not going to cover it too much in depth again, but traditionally, like I said, you're installing individual applications or pushing them to each of your physical desktops, where we can just layer applications in by clicking a button, and student A gets application A on their virtual desktop, or just access to it in general. So you can, again, provision these apps on the fly, and everyone has access to them almost instantly. And again, the application management, like I said, is so much easier for you because you update it once, and the next time an end user's faculty logs in, they have the latest version, and that's that. There's nothing else to it. So a lot of people ask, how do we do this? How do we provide these high-end applications? How do we deliver them with just a server? Well, it's not just a server, obviously. We put what's called Nvidia grid cards. So they're physical GPUs that we put into Dell, HP, whatever it may be, Cisco, UCS servers, and Horizon in all its magic, and some of the Nvidia magic, we can install the Nvidia graphics driver on the virtual desktops themselves. So it's called SVGPU, Shared Virtual GPU. So we're actually accessing the physical GPUs that are in these servers instead of using the CPU for all of the rendering of video processing like you would typically do in a virtual desktop environment. We're actually using physical GPUs to render all of your graphics. So I was actually the other day watching a 4K video on a virtual desktop at a data center 6 hours from my house, and it was not even a jitter. So this was a new deployment that we just wrapped up, and it's pretty incredible what we can do, and the amount of users that we can condense on a physical GPU and a physical server, the amount of physical or virtual desktops, excuse me, and applications we can deliver from a physical server is quite impressive. Those numbers are great, and if anyone wants to talk about that offline, we can certainly do that and give you a demo of some of this stuff. So I mentioned some of the deployment options, your traditional VDI versus cloud hosted, and your hybrid options. Your traditional VDI is going to be a CapEx model. Obviously, it's going to be a capital expenditure. You're going to buy hardware. It's going to reside in your data center, running on your network gear. And that's the traditional way that we've done it in the past and been very successful with it. It provides greater flexibility in regard to delivering these desktops and applications because some of the cloud hosted and hybrid models aren't there yet. Why? Because your internet connection between your data center or your school district and the cloud, it depends on what goes on between there, right? We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns there. But when we deploy something in your data center, we know what's there for the backbone of your network, what hardware it's running on, what storage we're using, and it provides a much richer experience. We're getting there in the cloud hosted and hybrid models, and you're going to see that improve, more and more. But there's still always that unknown at this point between, again, where your internet connection ends and where it picks up your cloud provider. So we typically do the on-prem traditional VDI deployment for school districts. There are the cloud hosted and hybrid models. Those are both cloud hosted is a fully OpEx model, pay per user per month, pay per year, you save some money, that sort of thing. But we're still not quite there to deliver these high-end applications as far as, AutoCAD, Photoshop, medical programs. It's not quite there yet, but again, we're getting there. And VMware with its partners is making huge strides. I feel every VMworld I go to, they're getting better and better. And then again, the hybrid model is a great solution for, say, a DR scenario. So it's an OpEx CapEx model that allows you to have your on-prem high-end servers to deliver these applications, but also if there is downtime in your data center, or you want to provide some lower-end applications like just say Adobe Acrobat or Office 365 in the cloud, and you want to run your high-end workloads on-prem, that's an option. That's a nice way to do it, and you can save yourself some money with that solution. So those are your three basic options when it comes to deploying VDI. Again, I am not a firm believer in the cloud being there yet for delivering high-end applications. So if you are thinking about this, the on-prem way is the way to do it, or a hybrid model. Let's see. So how does Horizon solve these challenges we talked about earlier? So cost obviously is always a big factor. We lower the cost of workstations. You're not paying $6,000 per machine in your lab environment that only get utilized X amount of hours a week. You don't have to refresh them as often, and you can use the existing devices that you have to access the Horizon environment. So pretty much any computer, any tablet, anything that you already have in your environment, as long as it has an internet connection and can install the Horizon software or has a web browser, you'll be able to access these applications and virtual desktops from them. You're uncoupling all of these STEM applications from a physical lab, like I mentioned. Students can access these applications and desktops from anywhere in the world that they have an internet connection. On vacation, from their house, the library, an airplane at 30,000 feet. Like I said, the educational outcomes are high. We've seen teachers really embrace this because they can now assign homework and say, hey, go home and render a 3D model for us by the end of the week. Go home and do XYZ in Photoshop. Go home, do XYZ in our medical 3D imaging software. And teachers love that because the students are really embracing that and really kind of seeing the value of, oh, wow, this is really cool. We can access this from home, especially those students that are really driven. And you're seeing that a lot more lately, students that are driven, that want to get a college education, and they take these things and soak them in. And then again, outside of collaboration, students can work together, work in the library, not just be stuck in that lab. And then for you, the IT administrator, you don't have to maintain these physical devices anymore. You manage it from your office. Updating applications is a breeze. You don't have to, I hated SCCM. It was a nightmare. So it's going to make that lifecycle management of your applications and desktops so much easier to manage. You don't have to worry about the physical failure of devices anymore, except for servers. If you have, a stick of RAM go bad, guess what? You're never going to notice because you're going to have enough compute, networking, storage to make up for a server to be down doing maintenance. And again, fewer desk-side support calls. You got an issue, Horizon's got some great tools to look from, again, sitting at your desk, what's going on in the user's virtual desktop session or virtual application session. And again, just manageability is unbelievable. And then this is one of my favorite slides to kind of take a look at. I'm not going to read it through verbatim for you. I'm just going to pause a minute and give you a second to kind of read through it. So this is from a student's perspective, what Horizon has done as far as giving them, again, access to virtual desktops and applications, not only at school, but at home with their friends, in the library, in study hall. It really allows that student the full education that they need to use these applications and desktops. And again, I think we're going to send this deck out. So if you don't want to read it now, that's fine. But you can take a look at it. And it's amazing some of the outcomes that we've seen with a good majority of the school districts that we've been engaged with. And they have nothing but good things to say about making this investment in the hardware and software. And again, they realize how much easier it made their lives. So I'll pause, let you read through this. I don't know if anyone had questions, Megan. I wasn't really looking at the chat or anything like that. But if you do have questions, feel free to chime in and,
There's no questions in the chat right now, but if anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and unmute and say them now. or type them.
Yeah. And if anyone would like to have a more in-depth conversation, we can certainly do that about Horizon, vSAN. I can go into a whole spiel about vSAN. I have a nice deck about that. I think it's actually after this. Yeah. So if anyone wants to have a follow-up conversation about, how this might be able to help you in your school district, we're more than happy to have that conversation with you. No pressure. I just like talking about the technology and whiteboarding things out. So
sure, and
feel free to reach out.
We can sit down and kind of show you how different school districts have rolled out this kind of technology. You don't have to jump in and spend $1 million on this.
No, not at all.
You can start out small. We can help you through a way to demonstrate it to your organization. Pilot a proof of concept.
Something like that.
We actually have our own lab, and we can help you put together real life scenarios for your school district.
Yeah, and I'd love to, anyone that's interested, give you a demo. Like Jim said, we have a great lab environment. I can really, break down the parts and pieces of Horizon and show you the back-end management and a demo of, how some of the 3D rendering works and the Nvidia GPUs work and how that all ties in and delivers these desktops and applications and really show you that.
Right. And we'll even help you through the grant request process if you want to avail yourself of the Smart Bond Act money that's available there, or Project Lead the Way. We can help you put together the justification for that together with VMware.